Welcome to the Mavericks podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing a story about pride. This story is something that's relatively close to my heart and not something I thought I'd be sharing anytime soon. I learned a really big lesson from this story, but it was the only one that I couldn't get to leave my head when I was writing today. So maybe this story will also help you. But without further ado, I have my whiteboard behind me, and I'm recording this time. So let's get into it. For this specific story, I had two instances of it throughout the year. And the last instance, it held me back a lot more than I would have liked. The first one wasn't so bad. The first one was in January. And in January, I made a decision to transition from personal training and the business that I'd started to leasing and apartment locating, so real estate in a way. And in the process of the transition, I had to stop taking clients on and also wait for my other job to take action. And in between, I still had to work clients, but I wasn't getting paid for it. So I was spending time without having some sort of future income guaranteed coming back to me. And that worried me, especially since I wasn't doing anything else for income. And I still had this 2 to 3 week window that I couldn't do anything. So my friend at the time, I had just moved in with him a few months prior, and he's like, "Oh, do Uber." And I don't know if it was this time specifically, but somewhere in between, he was like, "Hey, you could do this." And for me, out loud, I was like, "You know what? Sure." I would sign up, and we would think about doing it every now and then. I was too much. I was avoiding doing it, especially by myself, because doing things new by myself is really hard. So I try to have someone there with me. If not, sometimes I can push through, but in this case I didn't. And in that process, I avoided it, which at the time didn't mean much because, again, I made it all the way through and I started my new job, had income coming in, and was starting to roll the dice, or not roll the dice, but roll the ball forward into making good progress, unlike any that I had made before this time specifically, or at least on a consistent basis, right? Because doing personal training, it was my own business, and how well I marketed myself, which was not very well at the time, determined how well I got paid, which again, I wasn't good, so I wasn't doing very good. In this case, I was working for someone else. I had a guaranteed quote-unquote income, so I had something I could kind of rely on. And the further I got into it, I got used to it. I started getting a little bit more money. I made commissions, stuff like that. So this one, ultimately, I pulled it off, and I didn't have to use Uber. And I'll get to the metaphorical significance of this whole thing later in the story. The next situation was fairly recently, and I think I just walked off camera, but in September, I had a similar instance, but in this case, more dramatic. More dramatic in a sense of being, I had no other options I was going to school full-time in college. I had left, actually, in September. The beginning of September was the last day of my job. I left to do school full-time, and I was doing accelerated courses, and I was also doing an accelerated EMT course to get that out of the way. So it was a 3-month course, and then I had like 4 classes in college that I was taking that were all accelerated. I just don't know. They were all different times, right? So I couldn't tell you exactly off the top of my head the different timelines. But I was doing those 2 things, and it was taking up a lot of my time, especially with EMT. This specific program that I took, I would go 1 week out of each course. There's 2 sections. So one section, at the end of it, I would go in person for a week straight for 5 days from 8 to 5. And then it would do it again in the next section. So I had two weeks where I literally couldn't do anything but go there 8 to 5, right? And then come home. And then I still had to do extra coursework on top of that. The first week, the first time it happened was not too bad. The second week was a little bit of an issue. But the first week, I made it through. I don't know a polite way to say this. I didn't do my work to the best of my abilities, right? Outside of those classes. But again, I noticed I was getting low on income or on the money that I had saved up. So income was kind of going down the drain, right? It was just going down. And I was mindful of that. I was like, okay, I have a little bit of time. What can I do to start getting more of an income? Now I thought about locating, and I genuinely tried again, or at least to what my mental capacity was at the time, which was not very much because of all this stuff that was going on. I was very much drained, and any effort that I put towards locating felt like it was a disaster, and any leads that I got eventually just dissipated. So they weren't serving me well, and me putting my time into that, no matter how much I really wanted to, and I didn't want to let my brokers down especially, I ultimately fell short. And that was my fault. Now, as the second course went on, I had those times in between, right? And I did schoolwork, and I did my EMT. And I had, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. I think it was 5 weeks. So I had those 4 weeks where I had clinicals, school, and then more EMT work before I had to do the next in-person class. And doing that, towards the end of the week, I would have some free time, but I chose, instead of going out and making a little bit of income, I had a brilliant idea. I would make this app and sell it to the apartment complexes, make money, whatever. And I got the idea down. I got the pitch. I got it all made. So I was like, this is my next big plan to avoid anything else, right? And I was like, it can make me some money, and I can move on. I can move forward. Little did I know, there's a lot more work to a pitch than that. You have to get in front of the right people, and me being naive but ambitious, I tried to do that, just not very effectively. So didn't work out. So that was off the list. And once that happened, it kind of reality hit me in the face, and I was looking at maybe 2 to 3 weeks left of what I had in my emergency fund, with no luck locating. Income was still going down. Pitch obviously didn't work. I couldn't go back to PT, or personal training, because the old clients that I had were too far away, and there's no guarantee that I could do that. And I had tried to apply for another few jobs in the area. Those ultimately didn't work out, because turns out the certification I have isn't always applicable everywhere. So unfortunately, that was kind of like a light fire to the flame. I don't know. Didn't work out. So all of those things, all these skills that I supposedly had, didn't freaking work. And I felt kind of hopeless, like a lot of the work that I had done a lot to accomplish seemed like it was not going to be worth it. So I sat down again. This time, the second weeks that came by, and we're in October now, so we're no longer in September, so it's October. I also had to move with my sister to the place that I'm at now. And that was hard enough because it also happened in the same week, or at least we had to move, or I got the news the same week that I was doing my last in-person week at EMT, which means the entire time I was at the EMT school, I was worried about having a place to live, for me and for my sister. And that took a really big mental toll on me, although I think I was doing better at this point. So I was still positive, and I understood that while it was panic-inducing to a degree, a little bit of anxiety, I knew that the next following week I would have the time to properly put something together. But I tried to do what little I could in the meantime. But this was also going to take away from the income that I did have. So it was going to go down even more. So I wasn't happy about that, obviously. The closer it got to November, halfway through November we finished. And then towards the end of November, I was actually faced with, I can either do Uber or find some other thing that would work. That's a question mark, so don't question me. But in order for me, because I already had a contract, tentative contract for my EMT, so I was guaranteed a job afterwards. But even after I graduated EMT, I still had 2 weeks that no income was accounted for. And on top of that, it would be another 2 to 3 weeks after I start before I get paid. So I had 5 weeks, long term, where I would not have any sort of pay, and I had all of my bills due, literally within the first 2 weeks. Not a good idea for me, right? Because I can't just go start a job because they're going to want someone who's going to be there longer than 2 weeks because of this. So I had to figure out what can I do in this time to give me a little bit of income to allow me to then continue living, I guess you could say. This was the harder part for me because I now was facing the reality of I need to do Uber or get really good at asking for people for money. And I hate asking people for money. It is the bane of my existence. If you want proof of that, ask my mom. I hate doing it. And sometimes she insists on it. So, love you, Mom, but she knows how much I struggle with it. So eventually I did Uber, right? And at first, it's kind of like I just kind of gave up. And not while doing it, obviously. While I did the job, I was doing the job. But it was kind of registering in my head as this is the lowest point that I could possibly be. And I'm not saying that, hey, doing Uber is not good. I mean, it's an easy job, you don't have to think much, which I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't put it together how much of an advantage I could use that as. But before this, in my mind, and I'm going to take a seat now, in my mind, this was the absolute lowest that I could go. So doing Uber marked that I had lost everything. That I could make monetarily valuable, in my opinion. So this is what I truly believed in my head, which is why I avoided it for so long. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I've seen people get lost in their pride. I've gotten lost in my pride. right? This was my bottom, which is a lot higher than other people's, and it could be lower than some. But for me, this was my lowest point, at least in how I valued myself. Being able to humble myself enough to take on that in order to take care of myself and my sister being a big part of it, it changed the way that I look at things, which is why I was trying to avoid telling this story, because this story does still mean a lot to me emotionally. Because it changed the way that I approach almost everything now. And again, it's not because it's Uber, it's because of the significance around it. Because I did feel like I lost everything. And feeling obligated to take care of your sister, or take care of someone in your family, or someone that you care about, and feeling like you're not living up to that, it's hard. So it was hard for me to do, but it's changed my perspective on a lot of things now. Because once this happened, it became significantly easier for me to do things that I didn't enjoy, or that I didn't find that was comfortable for me. So, let me get this out of the way. I thought I was going to lose everything. Mentally, I thought I did lose everything. But in reality, it really freed up a lot of mental space for me. Because now, this eraser doesn't work very well. Because now, I think within the last 2 weeks, I've done, I think between 8 and 10 things that make me extremely uncomfortable, to the point of the whole Uber situation or more. Whether it's talking to people, introducing myself, going to a completely new place that I'm not comfortable with, going, for those of you, well, going to the movies, which I don't typically do. All of these things that I've done made me extremely nervous. And I'm getting a lot better at doing those things. And I'm starting to enjoy them a lot. But none of that would have happened if I didn't push myself down enough to do something like Uber or an equivalent, later on down the line. But it changed my whole perspective on things in a good way. Because now I'm able to do things that I do find uncomfortable. And I have an absolutely amazing time doing them. Because all of the things that have made me uncomfortable have also made me grow. And that's how I correlate the two. So when there's something uncomfortable or something that I'm uneasy, unsure about, I try and face it head on. And it's becoming more and more true. And I hope that maybe can be true for someone out there. Because I think that facing those fears and facing what does make you uncomfortable, especially when it comes to pride. A lot of people have prideful tendencies. We're all human, right? This was one of my lowest points. So I hope that maybe someone who's having a similar issue can listen to this and find some value in it. For me, it changed my life. Maybe it can change yours too. Y'all have a good night.